embodied loving kindness, or what I'm also calling practical loving kindness. And I'll just start by saying that I have always had a passion for peace, because we're talking about what do we want our lives to symbolize? What do our lives stand for? And we're still in the power number 8, which is the power of symbolization. I've always had a passion for peace. This is part of my own true nature. That's how it feels. And in 2000, I sat at the feet of the Dalai Lama, who also has a passion for peace. And I received, to the best of my ability, his Heart of Wisdom teachings. Bless, bless, bless. This was a peak experience in my life. In the almost unbearable heat of those several days in the Valley of the Heart's Delight, all of us were rapt. His major teachings were about how specifically, this was in that moment, his teachings were about how specifically to become the embodiment of compassion. It is essential, he said, to continually examine oneself. Buddhahood is never complete. It is an ongoing task. We should cultivate spiritual discipline, and in that practice, cultivate positive qualities. This requires recognizing our potential, and to do that, we have to draw from science and all the wisdom teachings. All the wisdom teachings. With our spiritual practice, we're trying to condition our mind to understand the relationship between our body and our mind. And secondly, we should cultivate heart. Heart, the Dalai Lama said, is grounded in faith. All the world's religions arrive here. Love, compassion, tolerance, forgiveness, and self-discipline. And someone in the audience asked, why do there seem to be contradictions? Even the Buddha, says the Dalai Lama, gave contradictory spiritual teachings. Do you see? Each student has a different way of understanding due to mental dispositions, spiritual inclinations, and interests. So each person hears and perceives in a completely different way. The wisdom teachings, says the Dalai Lama, are like medicine. Each individual requires specific medications and specific dosages. The key for each of us is, with deep introspection, to begin to understand what we ourselves, each of us, requires. That is the essential nature. And then we can begin to move into peace. And I will just say that in this particular moment, what interested me the most in the Dalai Lama's teachings, and what was seated most deeply inside of me because of my background and what I was leaning into and because of who I was at the time, and I just so happened to be teaching peace studies in the community at that time. And what came in for me was his body of teachings on the ancient enemy. That's a big part of compassion, is understanding our enemies. Our own mental affliction, he said, is our greatest enemy. Mental affliction, he says, we can never run away from. It's constant. Its only task is to cause us injury and harm. Internal mental affliction, he said, is far worse than our external enemy, because the external enemy isn't thinking about us all the time. The external enemy goes home for dinner and never gives us a thought, but our internal enemy is always with us. And we can also, by the way, dwell on the external enemy and how much good is it going to do us, because the external enemy isn't even aware that we are dwelling on him or her all the time. Those are some of the things that he brought up. The key teaching and accomplishment is to find inner peace and hopefully inner love. Love of self, right? Inner love, deep inner love. Loving kindness toward our own selves, which then in the end becomes loving kindness projected out into the world. Because if we can find that space within ourselves, we will be able to live that way, walk that path, walk our path in the world. Okay, so now I would like to segue into Sharon Salzberg and her teachings on loving kindness, and specifically her teachings about metta meditation, M-E-T-T-A, metta meditation, to cultivate peace and love within. And she begins with the idea to be still and go within. It is very hard for me not to wander from the notes. But right now I am thinking about Sharon Salzberg, and I want to share something that I heard her say when I was with her one time. And she said, I went to Burma and with the monks, and she said, so I said, well, I'm here to learn how to meditate. And they said, great. She says, what do I do? And the monk said to her, okay, yeah, just go sit down and breathe. And she said, oh, okay. So go sit over there, go sit down and breathe. So she went and she sat down and she started breathing. And she breathed for a while. And it was pretty good, And then after a while she got up and she went back to the monk and she said, okay, I did that. I breathed. I sat there and I breathed. And then now what should I do? So the monk says, okay, go sit over there and breathe. And so she goes back and sits down and starts breathing and breathes for a while, longer, and then gets up, goes back to the monk and says, okay, I'm breathing. Now what should I do? And the monk says, go over there and sit down and breathe. And she says, yeah, but I just did that. And he said to her, well, that's it. That's all there is. That's meditation, and that's where that story ended. And she realized, maybe I'm reading too much into this. That was her beginning, because a lot of us say, wow, how do you meditate? And that's what she said. She went all the way to Burma to hear that. How do you meditate? Breathe. Okay, just sit down and breathe. Now again, here's also leaving the notes behind. She talks about in her book Loving Kindness, she talks about somebody who wants to detach from his shadow. So she tells the story. So he looks down and sees the shadow and starts walking, and the shadow's walking with him. And then he says, oh, okay, well, this is a story she heard from one of the monks. Okay, well, I'll start running and maybe I can outrun the shadow, And so as fast as the running goes, as fast as the shadow goes, it never leaves. It's always there. The only way you can get rid of the shadow is by stopping, sitting down, and having the sun directly overhead. And then your shadow disappears. But the only way you could do it is by stopping. So I like that little story too that she tells. She says, to begin with, we find internal happiness by self-examination. That's what the book is about. And then what we are going to try to do as a result of the self-examination is abandon that which is unskillful inside of us. And we want to cultivate that which is skillful or good. So we have to look at what does it mean to us, our behavior, and how are we enacting it in the world. The overall goal is to cultivate love, compassion, sympathetic joy. That means be happy for other people, and equanimity and equalized inner states so that we're not going to get thrown off balance. What is unskillful is the display of anger and fear and grasping. these are states which create burdens for others and bring harm. So that's part of what we want to try to overcome. That which is skillful in good, and good is that which aligns the self with an expanded view of what is possible for us. How do we do that? We use our spiritual practice to expand the vision of what we think is possible. We begin by cultivating the appreciation of our oneness through others through generosity. So here's a beginning point: generosity, non-harming. I'm not going to harm others. I'm going to be generous. I'm not going to harm others. And then through right speech and right action based on those things. The key to our deepest happiness lies in changing our vision of where we seek it. Change our vision of where we're seeking happiness, because we're looking in the wrong directions to try to find happiness most of the time. When we get what we want in the moment, especially in our consumer-based culture, we always think, oh, if I could just get this, I'll be happy. Could be anything. But when we get what we want in the moment, it's something like the appeasement of an unhappy, insatiable child. Then, wanting the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. That's transitory happiness. That's what I'm still talking about Sharon Salzberg. This is what she calls transitory happiness. The world is not inherently stable. It is not inherently unchanging, and it is not inherently safe. So, what are we going to do? Everything changes. Okay, so therefore, the path to true happiness consists of integrating everything, all that is, and teaching ourselves how to love no matter what is going on. This requires inner practice and conditioning ourselves into a wider vision, probably. Understanding a much bigger vision. This is a practice. And in this practice, here are some of the aspects of this practice. One is, here's what we want to gain from it. We want to become free from a thing that in Buddhism is sometimes called suchness. Suchness is like a specific state of being. I can only be happy if things are a very certain way. I will be happy when this thing is achieved. That's suchness, something such as this, right? So free from suchness, to become genuinely present to all within and around us in the moment, to become intrinsically whole, and to become free from fixations. Letting go, letting go, letting go, free from fixations. This she calls the great fullness of being, which equals love. Love is the great fullness of being. And that equals being undivided, unfragmented, and completely present. To pay attention is to love. Be fully in attention. That is to love. The method, what is the method? The method is to find the state of stillness within, even as all things are coming and going. That's happiness. That is the core of happiness. Everything is going to keep moving within and around us, but how can we find a state of stillness within that? Sharon Salzberg calls this finding this place of stillness within ourselves as all things come and go, a revolution within the self. It's nothing less than revolutionary, because it's not how we normally think. It's not the way we normally think. And this revolution in the self, finding the state of stillness within the self, leads to the creation of a revolution in the world. And she calls this the revolutionary art of happiness. Radical. It's a radical change within and outside. Okay, so to attain happiness, we can go there through learning. One way is to learn metta meditation. The word metta, the root of the word metta, it has two roots. One is gentle and one is friend. Gentle and friend. And what we want to do with this kind of meditation is we want to cultivate loveliness, heavenly abodes within ourself and around us, and we want to create unconditional love in both in our heart and our mind. And in Buddhism, there's no difference, there's no distinction between the heart and the mind. It's all one, and they call it the state of citta, unconditional love in heart and mind. So this is metta meditation. Okay, and no matter what is happening, that we would move toward a higher way of knowing. She gives an example of a student complaining about his mother and the way she was and the way he grew up and, things like that. And the teacher says to the student, basically, you need to love your mother. You need to love your mother. And the student says, well, she wouldn't let me, she won't let me. And the teacher says, she can't stop you, which I love. So it's like transcending, whatever has, tried to stop us and close us, that we're going to move into a state of love for that. The Buddha said, sustaining a loving heart, even for the duration of a snap of a finger, makes one a truly spiritual being. That long. If you can do it that long, to sustain that love, you're it. You're the one.
Say that again.
Okay. Sustaining a loving heart, even for the duration of the snap of a finger, makes one a truly spiritual being. See, we're already there. All of this stuff points to we're already there. We already know how to meditate. We already know how to do this thing. If you can do it for that long, go for it. It's not as hard as we make it out to be. Okay, metta meditation. So here is the metta meditation that she puts out. It begins with sitting and breathing, and then going into this sort of chain of mantras. May I be free from danger. May I have mental happiness. May I have physical happiness. May I have ease of well-being. Very simple. Free from danger, mental happiness, physical happiness, ease of well-being. Okay, fine. Okay, great. But then you go to the next level with it. Imagine someone who has been good to you. And you picture this person in your head, somebody who you're very fond of and who's been very good to you. And then you say, we're going to call this person Joe. And then you say, may Joe be free from danger. May Joe have mental happiness. May Joe have physical happiness. May Joe have ease of well-being. That's pretty easy. Then the next one is to go to the level of a beloved friend, Judy. May Judy be free from danger. May Judy have mental happiness. May Judy have physical happiness. May Judy have ease of well-being. And that's good. That's good. That feels good, right? So then, next level, someone you feel neutral toward, like your third grade teacher. Oh, Miss Sutherland. And you can barely remember her, but her name just popped in. May Miss Sutherland be free from danger. May Miss Sutherland have mental happiness. May Miss Sutherland have physical happiness. May Miss Sutherland have ease of well-being. Now we come to the challenge. Okay, the big challenge is someone with whom you have experienced conflict. And you go through the same process. Free from danger, mental happiness, physical happiness, ease of well-being. And that might be more difficult to achieve. And it might have to be remembered and remembered and remembered and practice and practice and practice. And that's the one where the big change begins to happen. Actually, it's all really, when I say that, that's not really true, because all of it is big change. When we pour that into ourselves and through ourselves, may I be free from danger. May I have mental happiness. May I be happy. Free from danger, happy, well-being. To allow ourselves that can be a very big deal. And to allow our enemy to have that is also a very big deal. So we're sending our enemy the wish for happiness and well-being. And that's revolutionary, because if our enemy becomes happy and is in a state of well-being, everything can change. Everything in the world can change. So the idea is to cultivate an equality of loving feeling toward ourselves and toward all beings. The idea here is love rules. Love rules. And where love rules, there is no will to power. And where power predominates, there love is lacking. The one is the shadow of the other. And that is what Carl Jung said. And Sharon Salzberg quotes him. So how do we get away from our shadow? And I told you the story earlier. We sit down directly beneath the sun. Go still, sit down beneath the sun. Meditate on generosity, gratitude, peace, love, and simplicity. And pour love into the neutral spaces inside ourselves. And into neutral spaces in the world too. But pour love into the neutral spaces inside ourselves. Because then we start conditioning our whole body, literally like our body, our mind, our heart, our spirit as one to become that, to be that and to hold that. Instead of holding neutrality, we condition ourselves to hold love. Then there are restraints also that are put forth in Buddhism. These are the basic 5 restraints. No killing or physical violence, no stealing, no sexual misconduct, and that would be being violent with sexuality or using sexuality to gain something or something like that. No lying. This is in terms of the power of speech. It's no lying, no harsh or idle speech, no slander. That all has to do with the power of speech. And then no clouding the mind with intoxicants that impair our thought process. So those would be the restraints. Those are something to live up to or to consider or to think about as we're traveling this path. Okay, so now I would like to leave Sharon Salzberg. So those are some of the things that Sharon Salzberg is putting forth in terms of how we can recondition ourselves and work with ourselves internally. Then I want to cut to Marshall Rosenberg, because I think Sharon Salzberg, a lot of it is about our internal state. And then Marshall Rosenberg with nonviolent communication is addressing how, if I'm coming from this internal state, then how can I be with another person, like somebody else? How can I work things through nonviolently? And he talks about these 4 areas in nonviolent communication, which are observation, feelings, needs, and requests. These are what we need to pay attention to, these 4 areas. Observation is about being specific about what you see or are experiencing, and then articulating that without judgment or evaluation. I'm going to give you an example in a second. And then our feelings, how do we feel about this? Because what we learn when we start exploring our feelings is that there are needs at the root of these feelings. The feeling represents some kind of need we have. Then the needs are connected to the feelings we have identified, and what we can do when we figure out what we need is we can figure out what we don't want and then translate it into what we do want. So that's part of understanding ourselves better. And then we make a request. And then we're very specific about that request. For example, would you be, Marshall Rosenberg gives this example of a request right in the beginning of the book. Would you be willing, this is the end result, would you be willing to put your socks in the washing machine? It's like a very clear request that somebody can say yes to without going through all the stuff that goes before. But I want to tell, so we're working on this class, right? Our class number 8, nonviolence. And so, so I want to tell you about, I think you'll understand it better if I give you an example from my own life. There's a lot of humor in it too when we understand this stuff. But anyway, so I live in a 2-story house. It divides into 2 apartments. At the present time, my son and his fiance and their little doggie are living on the first floor, which is the ground floor, and I live upstairs. So that's the situation. That's the situation. No judgment, just that's the observation. Okay, now here's the next observation. It's called the front of the house. So, an accumulation begins in the front of the house. It's more than 2 months worth, but I will, in the interest of being clear and fair, I will try to limit it to 2 months. Okay. The trash cans are askew. There is trash shoved in and around the cans. There are 2 sawhorses draped with dirty, faded rags. There is a broken storm door, and then this door has been removed, and it's rusty, and there's a rusty door jamb all around where the storm door was. The old storm door is shoved up against the fence by the garbage cans. There are 2 oil pans from an oil change. Presumably they're full of oil, and they're sitting on the edge of the driveway by the trash cans, but in the way that they're sitting, they are preventing the gardener from being able to get in and behind and around and doing the work that needs to be done to clean up. Okay, so this is an example. Okay, that is observing a situation. Trying to observe that without judgment. Okay, but here are my feelings coming up. Anger, predominantly anger. This manifests as a clenching with butterflies, like in the pit of my stomach. Frustration, blaming, thinking, how long is this going to go on? Wait. Ask a couple times. It's continuing, right? Okay. What do I need? What do I need? So I start getting beneath the feelings. Remember, so he's talking about observation, feelings, needs, and requests. So I'm working with Marshall Rosenberg right now. And Marshall Rosenberg is saying to me, okay, what do those feelings mean to you? What do you need? So I cut through the feelings, because a lot of times I would stop at the feelings and project those feelings out. See what I mean? I'd be yelling, or because I would let it build up maybe or something. I don't know what I would do. But I'm working with Marshall Rosenberg right now. So I'm going to cut through those feelings. What do I need? So I'm doing all my processing by myself, see, before I'm even doing it publicly. Okay, I need some kind of cleanup. I need some kind of order. I need this in an ongoing way. So, and I'm thinking, okay, why do I need that? Okay, it makes me feel better about myself. Then I started calling it curb appeal to myself. Like I need better curb appeal because I'm not feeling good about this. But also because I have clients come into my house, I have classes, I have all this stuff going on, and I want things kind of in order. It just makes me feel better, right? So I need cleanup, order in an ongoing way. Okay, so yeah, that's what I need. Then suddenly I found my feelings cut to gratitude, because I thought, oh, wait a minute, this isn't the worst thing in the universe. If this is the worst thing in the universe, what am I even thinking? This is silly. Don't ruminate on it so much. And then I have the next thought, oh, let's use NVC, nonviolent communication, and see if it works, right? So, okay. So then the next thing is, what can I do in this situation? That was number 3. So number 1 was, what do I need? Number 2 was I found myself cutting to gratitude. Number 3 was I found myself asking, what can I do to help the situation? What could I clean up? What am I willing to do? And then number 4 was get specific. Telling myself, get specific. I need a new door. I need new order for the trash cans. And I need an ongoing place for all the motorcycle and car maintenance and stuff like that, so that it's not going to be sitting out in the driveway, all of this grease and oil, right, and stuff. Okay, so what is going to be the request, I asked myself. And so the request is going to be, could you do something, and can we work on this, and can we figure this out? Because now I know exactly what I need, right? So here's what happens. I send a text, and the text says, when you get a minute, I'd love to talk with you about some house things. And I thought, that's not too bad. Okay, return text. I don't have a minute today. I'm busy. I'll call you later. Me, okay. Then we leave it, and then I'm like, no. Wait a minute. This isn't going to work. So I think, no, I don't want to do this on the phone either, because that's not, somehow I feel that's not going to be right. So I think, okay, I've got a feeling I need to do something else, and a phone call might escalate the problem. So I send another text, and the text says, actually, I realize I'd rather talk with you in person, because then we could look together and figure some things out whenever you have time. So then, within 5 minutes, he came upstairs, and I say, oh, hi, hi. Oh, I didn't expect to see you right now. I'm thinking about the curb appeal of the house, the door, the trash cans and such. I have like clients and classes, and it's also for me because, it makes me feel better. And he says, yeah, I just don't have time for chores right now. And here's me. Well, it's about me too. It's just kind of an all over feeling of, and then he says, I know it's subconscious. He said, I know it's subconscious. People register subconsciously that it's a mess. So I was pretty surprised by that. And I said, yeah, that's right. That is true. It's not like people just notice that there's a ripped up door, but it's subconscious, So I said, so I'm just thinking about what to do. And he says, well, I moved the oil pans out yesterday, and I can get rid of the sawhorses. And I said, great. And then he says, did I tell you I'm working on a new script? And I say, and he says, this one has great commercial potential. And I say, no, that's great, because this is all about hearing and validating. That's great. If you don't have time to get to the door, and then I go back to the door. If you don't have time to get to the door, I'll see if I can hire somebody. Him, okay, tomorrow I'm working, then I'm going surfing, but tomorrow afternoon I'll look at some YouTube videos and figure out how to fix the door. I say, great. That'll be perfect. Also, we can create permanent spaces for necessary things, validating, like oil pans. So nothing has to be a chore, because he had just said, I don't have time to do chores now. I said, well, let's change it so it's not a chore. Let's make it easy, and we can just take care of everything as we go along. And he says, cool. And he's happy. Very happy. And he leaves. And as he leaves the door between our spaces open so the dog can flow in and out. And the dog is energy flow. Because now there's movement. It's like breath. And it's all open. And now I realize that the NVC worked. And the reason it worked was because I figured out my needs before I made the appointment to talk about it. I processed my feelings by myself and realized that under my feelings were needs that I could actually articulate, and once I could articulate it, then we could move forward and I could make requests. It didn't have to be in anger, right? Okay, so it was an inner process, and then I didn't have to project my anger onto him. So the result was an enhanced relationship instead of a conflict. That's how nonviolent communication works. So back to the idea of observation, what's going on, then feelings, then get to the needs under the feelings, and then get to the requests. That's the easiest way to understand it, I think. And then I also use myself guidelines for effective communication, which a client, I called them rules for communicating. And one of my clients says, I don't like rules. Rules are made to be broken. If there's a rule, I'm gonna defy it. And I said, okay, that's okay, but I'm just gonna give you these guidelines. I usually call them guidelines, and you can just look at them if you want. And if you don't want to, it's okay. But I just want to show you some of these. So this was for a couple. So I actually gave each person a set of the guidelines, which they posted on their computers. Each one posted on their computer, and then they started playing with them. So, and I'll just give you the list. I'm working on these right now, but make an appointment with the person. This is the list. Make an appointment with the person. Be clear the meeting is to talk about a particular issue. Make the date as soon after the incident as possible. Keep the discussion centered on recent occurrences. I'm just going to leap through these. Address issues in a timely way. Be as specific as possible regarding what the issue is. Avoid the words always and never, like you always, you never. Because using words like always and never doesn't leave space for change. Marshall Rosenberg talks kind of around some of these things. These are things I've been using for a really long time. Avoid starting sentences with you, because that sounds like an accusation. If you start your sentences with I, you can invite the person to enter into your perspective, and you can create a bridge instead of a wall. You can set up a whole new way of interacting. And then don't bring up the other person's vulnerabilities, hit below the belt, because if this is, let's say if it's an intimate relationship, you know that person better than anyone, so you know what all their vulnerabilities are, and it's really easy to bring that up. And here's an example. I have an example here. This would be bringing up somebody's vulnerabilities. You know as well as I do, you've never been able to think clearly or stand up for yourself. And let's don't forget about how you were arrested for going along with those jerks 10 years ago. Okay, that would be like, bam, bam, bam. I mean, that's going to obviously very much exacerbate the conflict. Okay, and avoid using expletives, swearing, foul language, because that exacerbates it also. Don't assume you know what the other person is thinking. Ask questions. And be aware when you violate any of these, quote, guidelines. Open up to the violation. For example, I'm sorry I said that. I just realized I'm sorry. That is not how I want to communicate. And I sincerely want to create understanding between us. So those are just a few little things that I learned. So anyway, a couple weeks ago, I sent a couple of my clients home with those just for fun. And a couple who's been married 23 years. And then when they came back, I wasn't expecting anything out of it, but when they came back, the man said, I've been using the rules. And I said, the rules? And he said, the rules. The rules of harmonious communication. And it's working. And I said, I never thought I would hear you say that word, rules. And he said, I like it now. Because it worked, it absolutely worked. So these are all the different ways that we can start to move the energy and change. And this is a practice, okay? Overall, what we're trying to do, the essence is we're trying to change the definition of power and conflict. That takes us back to Brian Eisler, right? Power will be linking together. That's the new definition that we want to work toward, linking together. Conflict, a way to learn about each other and to work more synergistically together. So it's not about power over, it's not about who wins, it's about how we are going to learn and respect each other more. Now, I want to bring you guys in here for a moment. what if you have a horrible situation? So I'm going to tell you about another thing that happened to me last week, because the world is always performing where we're at, right? So first, let me mention the story of Sri Aurobindo, which I've told before. When he was arrested for allegedly blowing up a building, and then he was in jail, and this is during the Indian Revolution, the Indian Uprising. As he was in jail, he began to treat his jailers as God. And he started meditating and got this idea, right? Oh, it came to him. It was a download, right? So he starts treating his jailers as God. At first, they didn't believe it. But then, after a while, when he was unwavering, they did. They believed it, and they started becoming like that. And everything started to change. Then when he got out of jail, he didn't go back to the revolution. It was amazing. He basically, quote, like went in the cave. He started thinking about how we could create new consciousness in the world. And he devoted the rest of his life to doing that, not going back into the revolution. So I wanted to mention that story, but now I want to tell you what happened to me last week. So it was a Super Bowl, and I guess everyone was watching the game, but I was not. So I was out walking, and everything was pretty deserted. And I was out walking on the bluffs, and it was a Sunday, just a regular old Sunday, right? So I'm walking along, and this woman starts running toward me. There's nobody out there, but I see this woman, and she's running toward me, and there's a man running behind her. And she's running, and she started to fixate on me, and she was going like, she was waving her arm, like, back off. So I looked at that, and I thought, oh, this is a lover's spat, like that type of thing, because that's the way, like, get away from me, back off. But then she ran up to me, and she said, please, help me. He's after me. I don't know who he is. You've got to help me. And he's gaining. He's almost like right there, but he stopped in his tracks. And she was saying, I don't know what to do. You got to help me. Okay. And then I looked at her. At first I had the thought that went through my head, am I being set up? It was odd. It was really odd. And then that kind of disappeared because I saw her face was so red and she was so scared. And she was so scared. And he had stopped in his tracks back there. So I think, how am I going to save you? I mean, it was a fleeting thought. I had no phone. I had nothing. And he was after her. He was going to rape her. That's what was happening. Okay, and I put the whole picture together even before. She didn't have time to tell me, what was going on. So I'm standing there, and what I did was, he stopped, I stared him down. Okay, I just like got big. It's like big, like you would do with a bear, right? So I got big and I stared him down. He was twice her size, and he looked at me, and he saw something was shifting in the energy, and he turned around, and then he ran off and disappeared in the bushes. And so, but here's the question I want to ask you, okay? Because even in that split second, it was such a split second that I almost didn't have time, but I could feel the energy of this question arising. And the question would be, what would love do? What would love do, right? And I could feel it arising, but she was panicked and he was coming. I don't know if he's armed. Do you know what I'm saying? And also, I did a bunch of racial profiling. I'm going to tell you, I saw myself add this thing up as fast as I could, and I figured that guy's got a knife for sure, if not a gun. And he was menacing, like you could feel the energy. Okay, so I'm going to ask you guys, how would you handle it? Make it up. Yeah, it's on. Make it up. What do you? I mean, split second. What do you think you would do?
That was love. I mean, even like in any of these meditative books, they talk about get into your power, feel the love of the situation of this woman needs help, she needs love, and you're providing love for her, and you're telling him, whatever's running you right now, I will not allow for it. So he's not in love, and by staring him down, you can actually catch him in a consciousness of shifting from stopping his not love place by staying in love with her and saying, I'm here, I'll protect you. Love is here. I got you, you're fine.
So what if I thought about this. What if he kept coming, and what if he had a knife? Okay, because after this incident, we started talking about it. How do we protect ourselves? Do you know what I mean? What if he had a gun? There was nobody anywhere. Everything was deserted. And here's this incident with these 3 people. Those 2 and me, right? Okay, so I'm asking you guys, what could you, anything that comes into your mind, what could you do? Is there anything else that we could do in that situation? I mean, just anything that comes to you. I don't know the answer. That's why I'm asking.
Well, you didn't have a cell phone. The other thing I would have done if I had a cell phone is pull it out and start recording the situation.
Definitely get pictures.
Call 911.
Take pictures.
But pictures will be very intimidating for starters.
Excellent.
But I love that you basically channeled power. And you basically made yourself bigger than he was, in essence. Like you're calling in the power of all the divas, shall we say. Called in all of your power. He felt it and he went, I don't want to face this.
Yeah, once upon a time I ran into a man who was standing in a downtown area where I used to go to church. I was with my daughter when she was 3, and he was exposing himself. And so I walk up on him, and he starts approaching me and my daughter, and I said, put that thing back in your pants. This is a 3-year-old child, and you don't want to expose her to that. And he did. And I went, yeah. But yeah, just pull that power out. And
that is great. So those are some ways, definitely, of stepping into your power. Anything else that comes up?
That's what I used to do with dogs when I was taking my kids for a walk. In Guerneville, lots of the dogs would run free, and I would just make myself big and tell them to get, and they would.
Okay. So there's a lot of power in just us standing in our power and expressing our power.
Well, and also calling in power that's bigger than us. Like, if we're like, one of the things in Sharon Salzberg and in this woman, Jaden Phoenix, think of us as an evolution on an evolutionary continuum. Our divine essence is on that continuum, and where we are focusing ourselves on is basically the amount of power we're pulling in. So if we in a moment go to that expanded, essential, divine self and pull in that power, that's just attention. And with that attention, your power gets way, way bigger.
That's fabulous. Okay, that's fabulous. So here's what wound up happening. So she was panicked, this young woman, and she said, let's go, let's walk, let's keep going the way she was going, which is the opposite way I was going. Let's get as fast as we can out to a road out here, and then let's walk down the road, and we're going to go the opposite way that he's going. For some reason, this did not sit well with me. I don't know why. So I said, no, that's not what we're going to do. We are going the way I'm going, which is the way you would go back, and we are going to walk this trail right back in the direction you guys came from.
Take command of the trail.
Yeah. We're going to take command of the trail.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I was like,
Woo!
I just pulled
Warrior
myself
woman
up.
showed up.
I became like this warrior woman, and he was long gone. He disappeared, right? So we went back in the direction that he came from, and I was looking, I never saw him. I was scanning, and we started to talk about what do you do in this kind of situation? Because she said he was chasing me, he was going to rape me, and she said, he had spoken to her earlier on the trail. See, and then he started following her, and she had taken self-defense and learned what to do in a situation like this. But part of it was poke the person's eyes out. Yeah, but she said, ooh, but she said, I don't really want to do that. So she got confused. See, and she said, you would have to really hate a person to poke their eyes out. So she didn't even hate him. She just, she said, I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. So we talked about, do you blow whistles? Do you carry mace or pepper spray? We went through all this. Then a woman came walking toward us. Finally, another woman came walking toward us with a dog. She had a dog. And so I said to the woman, we were a little out of it. I said to the woman, what direction are you going? It was obvious that she was going the other way. And she says, well, I was. And I said, will you please turn around and walk with us? And I grabbed her, never seen her before, right? Basically, and she said, okay. And she turned around and started walking with us. So now we had 3 women and a dog. And so we all 3 had this huge conversation. And I told the younger woman, I said, here's what we're doing. We're going to my house. I am going to drive you home. I need to know if you have someone to take care of you, because she was so shaken. Is there someone there? How are we going to take care of this? But we're going to go to my house and I'm going to drive you home. So all 3 of us wound up walking to my house and the dog, and I did drive her home. But it set off a big chain of events. And I will say that for the next 2 days, I was intimidated about walking in the places I normally walk. And I started out, I saw somebody on the trail and I turned and came back. But then I did overcome it. But since this happened recently, it did start me thinking about what are ways that I could protect myself non-violently, including against someone with a knife or a gun, or somebody who's armed. I think the phone idea is very good, a very good idea. And I'm still going to be thinking about other ways to do it. But I think the big picture is that we do need to take some of these things into account, and we need to think about, okay, what does it mean? What would love do? How do we walk in love? And how do we walk in our power? And I love that when we're in our power, it's possible that the power of the universe is coursing through us. And a lot of times maybe there isn't anything we can do. We just have to do what we're called in that moment, the way we're guided just in that moment. So, okay, so this is all about learning and practice. It's practice. It's just practice, right? It's just practice. Okay, so just to bring this to an end, some of the other things that just to conclude, what we want to do to move into this state within ourselves and find love within ourselves is to begin by releasing comparison with anyone else, because it does become a very individual path, and what we would do in an emergency situation like that becomes very individualized, and we're going to be able to do it the way what comes to us in the moment, and later we might be able to say, oh, I could have done this or I could have done this, so I'll do that in the future. But releasing judgment about the way anybody else does the path, because we don't know, for sure. Also, becoming generous, and that's what Sharon Salzberg talked about. So what does becoming generous means? What does that mean? And it means releasing judgment. It becomes being generous in spirit, releasing judgment about other people, releasing comparing, releasing prejudice, releasing demeaning thoughts or ideas, releasing envy, because we never know behind the scenes what's really going on with somebody else. When we envy somebody behind the scenes, we're going to find out there was nothing to envy. We're all doing the best we can. Releasing avarice and releasing boredom too. Releasing boredom. That's part of becoming generous, is to find our way into the loveliness and the power and the beauty. But in the end, this all needs to be individually understood and applied. And the practice part of it is what the practice is about. So if you go back and to the idea of practicing metta meditation or something like that, the practice is about remembrance, to bring us back into a state of remembrance. And through remembrance, we move into a practice of maintenance. The maintenance is really critical because we can forget very easily. And in fact, maintenance can be really boring, but it can also be the most important part of our lives. Like you can go get a new whatever it is, but if you don't maintain that new whatever it is, it's going to fall into pieces, right? And I had a friend who was a pilot for United, and he said all the glory goes to the pilots and the flying, but he said that's completely misplaced. The most important job is the maintenance. That is the key for the airplanes. You know, it's all about maintenance. And for him, that was a big teaching because he tried to maintain everything in his life that way, you know, keep everything moving. And I say spiritual practice, like if you did the meditation, it's about maintenance of a certain state of mind that we want to achieve, state of mind, state of heart. And when we practice and when we remember through our practice and we maintain through our practice, what winds up happening is that we wind up embodying those ideas. And the embodiment is what we're totally after, where it gets embodied in ourselves. And then, but then beyond that, it becomes so individual that we do have to think on our feet continually. You know, with every situation that arises, we handle it to the best of our ability in the moment. Yet we are always being taught, right? We're always learning. So that's the end of what I have to say about practical embodiment of loving kindness, and then how we might walk that in the world, especially according to the Buddha, the Dalai Lama, Sharon Salzberg, Marshall Rosenberg, you know, and then living life.